पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaste. Welcome to the second session on Bhagavad Gita, your source of inspiration by Jayaji. I now request Jayaji to start her discourse.
Hari Om. We are about to start one of the most popular portions of the Bhagavad Gita, the last 19 verses of chapter 2, entitled Sthita Prajna. In verse 54, Arjuna comes up with his first question. This is a sign that his intellect has awakened. However, he asks a question that is not relevant to his situation. He has to find the courage and the conviction to face the battle, fight it, and win it. Instead, in verse 54, he asks Krishna, who is a perfect person? Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha. What are the hallmarks of one who has reached the state of enlightenment? What is his inner nature, and how does he interact with the world of finitude? Arjuna has heard of the Sthita Prajna state of enlightened people, of those who have reached the state of God realization, but he doesn't have the ability to spot a Sthita Prajna. We all have our own ideas on what makes for perfection, what makes for a self-realized person. One person thinks wearing ochre robes means perfection. Another person thinks that just waking up at 4 a.m. makes for perfection, so on and so forth. Arjuna wants an authoritarian definition of perfection. And who better to ask than Lord Krishna himself? When he asks this question, Krishna understands that he has only partially awakened. Nevertheless, Krishna answers in the next 18 verses with master strokes to paint the picture of a perfect person. It serves as a guide to humanity for all times. This portion has inspired scores of people down the ages. And in fact, it was Mahatma Gandhi's favorite portion. He would recite these 19 verses at every prayer meeting that he had. So Krishna's answer lies in verse 55.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogatan atmanyevatmana tushtaha sthita prajnastadochyate.
O Partha, when all desires of the mind are totally abandoned and one is fulfilled in the self alone by the self, then one is said to be a Sthita Prajna, one established in wisdom. So Krishna defines a perfect person by giving two qualifications, one in the negative and the other in the positive. The negative is important because we have no connection with Atman, so we can only understand from the negative perspective. The negative one is that one who has completely abandoned all desires from the mind. If the definition were to stop here, it would give a very dreary picture. So he quickly adds the positive one, which is as a result of being fulfilled in the self by the self. So the formula is human being minus desire equals God. Not just when it comes to enlightenment, but even in our normal daily life, we observe that it is desire that takes away from your action, from success, from happiness and growth. It robs you of your might and power. To regain perfection, you need to drop desire. However, desire can't be just wished away. Nobody can give up desire. You can only take up a higher desire that is more gratifying and fulfilling. As a result, the lower fascinations drop of their own accord. Go back to your own life. We have all experienced this. As a child, you were captivated with toys. Today, do you have desire for toys? No. How did the desire go away? Did you at any point in time make a decision to give up desires? No. Then what did you do? You just grew, you moved on to more satisfying things, to higher desires. The same as a result of which the desire for toys dropped. The same principle works now. As physical adults, we are spiritual children. And we are stuck with material and physical playthings. Rise to emotional joys, and the material preoccupations no longer have a grip on you. They lose their luster. Go a step further and pick up an intellectual ideal, and even the emotional attachments lose their charm. And finally, take the plunge to the spirit, and nothing will hold you back. All desires drop, you regain your immortal stature. As you rise above desire, objects of desire come to you unsought, unsolicited. The way to gain the world is to escalate to higher realms. You will obtain the lower effortlessly. Thus, you become successful and happy in the world while you grow to your divine potential. Krishna emphasizes the importance of sense control, which requires a strong and alert intellect. He gives the formula for self-control in verse 64.
रागद्वेषवियुक्तैस्तु विषयानिन्द्रियैश्चरन् आत्मवश्यैर्विधेयात्मा प्रसादमधिगच्छति.
But the self-restrained one who has gained self-mastery becomes serene, free from attraction and aversion. Such a one moves amidst the senses, controlling them. So, sense control includes two things. Before we get on with that, what exactly is sense control? Many of us talk about it. We tell our children that, control yourself. If the child were to turn around and ask us what is self-control, we wouldn't know. So here is the precise definition of self-control. What makes for control? Two things. One, don't let existing likes and dislikes directly propel you to action. We are all born with likes and dislikes. And during our lifetime, we pick up more likes and dislikes. These then become a powerful motor that drive you to action. So you're constantly running after that which you like and avoiding that which you don't like. All you have to do is bring your intellect in place. Let the intellect scan your likes and dislikes and decide whether to act on it or not. This is important because what you like may not necessarily be what is good for you. And what you dislike may actually be in your interests. So when the intellect is brought in place, you become free from the effect of likes and dislikes, and you function on the sane counsel of the intellect. So this is the first stage to self-control. The second is, you may not have a particular like or dislike. You may not even know the sense object. You may have experienced it for the first time. But you, let's say, eat a fruit that you have never tasted before. You like it, you relish it, you enjoy it. Up to that moment, you are not violating sense control. But what usually happens is, after the experience is over, the mind lingers in the enjoyment of the past experience. This creates a fresh like in your system. This is violating sense control. So, end experience with experience. Finish the experience, complete the enjoyment, move to the next experience. Don't let the mind go back to the past. Then you enjoy every moment of your life, because the next experience also offers enjoyment which you cannot access when your mind has gone to the past. So with this, both the first one, don't allow existing likes and dislikes to propel you to action. And the second, don't allow a new experience to create a new desire in your system. With this, your enjoyment actually enhances and your desires reduce. So it's a win-win situation. With a powerful intellect, you keep the senses and mind subdued, and you are set for taking off to higher realms. Sense control is important not only in spiritual life, but in the worldly sense as well. If you want to achieve anything, whether in this area of sport or business or music or art, sense control is of prime importance. Krishna concludes with the definition of happiness. We are all seeking happiness, but are clueless about where it lies or how to obtain it. Here is a precise definition that we can follow to rise to higher levels of happiness until we attain infinite happiness, which is the goal of all human existence. Thereafter, nothing in the world will impact on your bliss. Nothing can take away your happiness or add to your existing happiness. You'll remain untouched by the vagaries of the world, like the ocean that remains still in spite of all the rivers entering it. And this is beautifully presented in verse 70.
आपूर्यमाणम् अचलप्रतिष्ठम् समुद्रमाप प्रविशन्ति यद्वत् तद्वत् कामायम् प्रविशन्ति सर्वे स शान्तिमाप्नोति न कामकामी.
As the ocean, which filled from all sides with waters entering it, remains still, so one in whom all objects of desire enter obtains peace, not the kamakami, not the desirer of desires. In this verse lies the formula for happiness. Let's go back to where desire originates. Desire comes from a sense of unfulfillment, emptiness, void that we all experience. But even as you experience this emptiness, Vedanta says the truth is that you are in reality completely and totally full. When you don't know you are full, you become a fool. And that's where we all are. So, what you need is not objects of desire, but knowledge of your fullness. So, the formula here is happiness equals number of desires fulfilled divided by number of desires entertained. So if you go along with this formula and you want to increase your happiness, you either have to increase the numerator, which means increase the number of desires you fulfill, or reduce the denominator, which is reduce the number of desires you entertain. All our attention is on the numerator. The world over, people are running after objects of desire to fulfill your desires. But what's happening is that while your numerator increases, the denominator also increases. It's like you go to a mall with 3 desires, you fulfill those 3 desires, but in the bargain you see so many other things and come back with 10 desires. So what has happened to this formula? Your numerator has gone up by 3, but the denominator has gone up by 10 and your happiness has shrunk. So Krishna says that, and all of Vedanta says, that the numerator is actually irrelevant. It doesn't matter how low the numerator is. What really determines your happiness is the denominator. If you systematically bring down the denominator, your happiness keeps increasing. And if the denominator is brought down to 0, what happens? You've hit infinite happiness. Now, once you hit infinity, once you experience infinite happiness, anything added or taken away from it doesn't make the slightest difference. Even mathematically, infinite plus a million is still infinite. Infinite plus infinite is also infinite. Infinite minus 10 million is still infinite. And infinite minus infinite is not 0, but still infinite. So you have reached a state where you are completely free, not dependent on anything that the world has to offer. This lends power to you. So you have to experience it in your own life. The moment you rise above desire, you are in command of your personality. You are powerful to that extent, and amazingly, the object of desire comes to you. So, in a state, there was a king, a royal family, and things went on smoothly until there was a terrible flood. And everybody perished in that flood, including the royal family. There was a 3-month-old infant, and that infant, the governess, in her wisdom, put in a basket and allowed it to float away. And before she died, she told everyone that the prince is alive, the heir to the kingdom is alive, heir to the throne is alive. Find him. And she died. When the flood waters receded, there was a statewide search for the prince. And they kept searching, but could not find him. In the same state, there was a child who grew up as a beggar. And he would go out and beg, and sometimes he would hit the jackpot, somebody would give him a 500 rupee note. And at other times, he would not get anything. So he went through these ups and downs of a beggar's life. When he was 20 years old, suddenly the royal guards came, picked him up, and took him to the palace. And he vehemently tried to break free by saying that I haven't done anything wrong, I'm only a beggar. They didn't listen to him. And in the palace, they took a sample of his blood and came to the conclusion, it was proven that here was the prince, the heir to the throne. They were jubilant and excited. They first took off his beggar clothes, gave him a nice scrub, put royal clothes onto him, and put the crown on him and put him on the throne and said, Maharaj, from today onwards, you are our king and we are your subjects. So he didn't understand what was happening. He said, what does that mean? They said, you give orders, we follow them. So the first thing he thought of was to break free from this. So he said, make way. And they made way. He bolted. He wanted to go back to his life as a beggar. But they caught him and put him back on the throne and said, Your Majesty, we have looked for you for 20 years and we're not going to let go of you now. After all, he had royal blood in him, and in a short time he picked up the threads and became an outstanding king. On the first anniversary of his coronation, the citizens had planned a beautiful celebration. But in the morning, the king gave his security guards the slip and ran away with a parcel which contained his dirty beggar clothes. He changed into the beggar clothes and went to the same street where he was begging a year ago. And the experience was still the same, meaning he got the same treatment. Some people said, oh, it's so nice to see you after a long time, and they gave him a bonus. Others said, get away. But within him, it was a completely different state. So, who is he now? He's the king. Who was he a year ago? Was he the beggar? No, he was still the king. Then what is the difference? 1 year back, he did not know he was king. Now he knows he's king. And this knowledge of his kingship makes all the difference. He's not touched by anything that happens while he's begging. Whether people insult him, whether people give him a bonus, because the whole thing belongs to him. This is the message of the Bhagavad Gita for us, that every one of us is born king. We are kings and queens of the universe, but we don't know it. And because we are in ignorance, our whole approach to the world is different. We go out to the world as beggars. We are asking for sense objects to enjoy. We're asking for emotional feeding. We're asking for intellectual delights when we have everything within us. We are the abode of infinite happiness. So, the most urgent thing that is required is knowledge of your fullness. Then everything else will fall in place. So don't bother about problems you're having with your spouse or your children or your daughter-in-law or son-in-law or whatever it is. These are like the beggar's problems. But you are not the beggar. You're not the body. You're not the mind. You're not the intellect. You are the king. You are Atman. And as you gain knowledge, your desires drop. Your dependence on the world decreases, and it's a completely different experience. So Krishna concludes this portion by saying, this is the state of Brahman. Having attained it, one is not deluded again. Being established in it, one attains union with Brahman even after death. So, what is the starting point? You have to begin by learning to say no to the world. when the President of the United States visited India for the first time after he became president. His program was chalked out minute to minute. Everything was planned perfectly. He lands in Delhi and suddenly he wakes up to the fact that India is a spiritual country. So he tells his people, I want to meet a man of renunciation. And this is conveyed to the Prime Minister's office, and the Prime Minister's office goes into a tizzy because where do you find people of renunciation anymore? In Delhi, though impossible. So while they are debating what to do with this request, one young officer in the Prime Minister's office tells them, don't worry, I'll fix it. So they are great fixers. And they tell him, are you sure you know what you're doing? Because we're dealing with the president of the most powerful country in the world. He said, I am confident. And he goes his way and the others go to do whatever they have to do. He walks out of his office and he sees a youngster strolling on the road. He calls him and says, are you jobless? He says, yes, sir. Do you want a job? Oh, I've been desperately looking for a job for the past 6 months. Okay, I'm going to give you a job. Tomorrow you have to come and your job entails just 15 minutes. And for that, I will give you 10 lakhs of rupees in hard cash. Now the youngster is suspicious. He says, I don't want to do anything irregular and get into trouble. He says, it's all above board. I am from the Prime Minister's office. So he says, what do I have to do? He says, you see that tree there? Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, you have to come and sit under that tree. And people will come and offer you things. All you have to say is, no, thank you. You get it? He says, yes. You will be offered things worth more than 10 lakhs. But don't say yes to any of that, because if you say yes, you will get exposed. You will get neither the 10 lakhs nor this. He says, I understand, sir. I'll be there tomorrow. He goes away. And next morning at 10 o'clock, he's sitting under that tree looking like a picture of Shankaracharya. So they bring the president there. And Americans do their homework. So he knows exactly what to take to a man of renunciation. There is a silver thali with fruits and so on and so forth. He goes and offers it to him. Thank you, sir, but no thank you. The president is amazed. He puts it aside and offers more. Every time the youngster says no to something, the offer made is many times more valuable. And the youngster says no to everything. Finally, the president is so impressed with him, he says, let me donate $3 million for you to start an institute of renunciation. So the young man says, I'm already renounced. Why do I need to start an institute? No, thank you. I don't need this. And the president is so pleased that he does a Sashtang Namaskar. You know what a Sashtang Namaskar is? Flat out. Because the president does this, everyone else has to do a Sashtang Namaskar, including the officer from the Prime Minister's office who knows that he's fake. And everybody goes back. This young officer rushes to his office, picks up the 10 lakhs in cash and comes back to offer it to the youngster. And he tells him, well done, my boy. You did such a good job that I'm giving you a 10% bonus. There's 11 lakhs in there. No, thank you, says the man. The officer says, what? This is the deal that we had fixed yesterday. And I'm even giving you a 10% bonus. So what are you acting difficult for? He says, no, sir, I'm not acting difficult. I genuinely don't want it. Again he tries. Again he says no. The more he tries, the more firm the young man is in not wanting it. Finally, he gets fed up and says, "Are you mad?" He says, "I'm not mad, sir. You're blind. Have you not seen what happened just now? For 15 minutes, I pretended to be a man of renunciation, pretended that I don't want anything. And all kinds of things were offered to me. And the president fell at my feet, even you fell at my feet. What will I not get if I truly renounce?" So this is the power of renunciation. The moment you don't want something, magic happens in your life. But it must be genuine. So this is the state of fullness that he speaks of. And now we come to chapter 3, which is the most attractive chapter for the common person because it speaks of karma yoga, the path of action. So finally, after hearing the 18 verses which deal with a sthita prajna, Arjuna now is fully awake, his intellect is alert, and comes down to the basics, which is, what do I do with my life now? And Arjuna is confused. He tells Krishna in the first 2 verses of chapter 3, you eulogize wisdom, knowledge, and at the same time, you are pushing me into this ghora karma, terrible act of killing my own people. You tell me one definite path by which I may attain Shreyaha. Shreya is good, my own development. Arjuna is a warrior. He's used to following orders. He's used to specific things. Okay, go out and fight or retreat. This, sometimes knowledge, sometimes action, confuses him. So he asks Krishna to give him one definite path. And he clearly defines that I want to achieve Shreyaha, which means there are 2 paths available to humanity. Shreyaha, the path of the good, which will take you to higher and higher realms and ultimately to the state of realization. And the other option available to us is Preyaha, which is the path of the pleasant, which is what we are all following. Instant gratification, immediate pleasure, which comes from sense contact. So Arjuna says, that is not what I want. I want Shreya. He says, you maintain that knowledge is superior to action, then why do you ask me to engage in this terrible action? Krishna answers by saying, since ancient times, there are 2 distinct paths laid out for humanity. The path of action for the active and the path of knowledge for the contemplative. So, right from the beginning, there are 2 paths that are available to humanity. These 2 paths are because, broadly speaking, there are 2 categories of human beings. One is people with many, many desires. Such a person needs to act, is naturally active by nature because the desires are the fuel that drive you to activity. Those with fewer desires, those who have traversed the spiritual path earlier and reduced the desires in their minds, are not driven to activity. Naturally, they do not take to action. They are more contemplative by nature. They like to reflect, analyze, weigh the pros and cons, and learn from this analysis. They need to study the scriptures, ponder over them, leading to meditation and realization. Now, Arjuna clearly belongs to the active variety and therefore must do Karma Yoga, the fascinating method by which you move Godward while mundane actions go on, while they get accomplished. So the first thing that Krishna tells Arjuna emphatically is that action is fundamental to life. Stop activity and you die. The state of perfection is not attained by merely abstaining from action. Everyone is helplessly driven to action by the vasanas or desires that one has. So the chronology of action is vasana, which is unmanifest desire, first manifests as thought in your intellect. It then gathers momentum as desire in the mind, and it finds fruition in action at the physical level. So if you have a vasana is inherent inclination, deep-rooted interest, innate leaning towards a particular thing. So if you have a vasana for music, you will get thought of music, you'll develop the desire to learn or listen to music, and it will result in the action. If you have a desire for tennis, you will be watching the Wimbledon every day. So the thought of tennis comes in your mind, you then form a desire to watch the Wimbledon and you actually watch it. Same thing with football. Whatever it is that you're doing. So now, this manifestation from vasana, thought to desire happens automatically. You can only stop desire at action level. So what Krishna says is that in the name of self-control, in the name of spirituality, in the name of controlling desires, people merely stop the desire from manifesting as action. So you have a desire to go out and eat. You say, no, I'm spiritual, I cannot do that. You have a desire to watch a movie. You say, no, I can't do that. So at the physical level, you withhold. But mentally, you're indulging. That you can't stop, or you don't know how to stop it. So such people, Krishna emphatically says, are hypocrites. And the majority of people who have turned to religion or spirituality belong to this category. There are only two ways of eradicating desire. One is knowledge. When a child grows into a teenager, childhood desires drop of their own accord. The second is to go through the experience, meaning actually fulfill that desire, but with the idea of overcoming it. So your mind is on the higher, while the body experiences the object of desire. This is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is to act in the area of your swadharma or talent or principal desire, predominant desire, with the mind on realization or spiritual evolution. This way, existing desires get fulfilled, but more are not created. This is Karma Yoga. There are three kinds of action. Krishna appeals to Arjuna to perform niyatam karma. Niyatam kuru karmatvam, karma jayo hya karmana. Niyatam karma is obligatory duties. Every one of us is born with certain obligations, and in our upbringing, in our growth, we acquire obligations. Our duty is to fulfill our obligations to the best of our ability. Keep away from kamya karma, that is the second mediocre state. Kamya karma is desire-driven actions. Today, nowadays, in the world, we are all giving in to desire. So all of us are driven helter-skelter all over the place by desire, and we are meekly succumbing to the desires. What is happening as a result of this is that the number of desires are increasing at a fast pace. The fulfillment of desire is not taking place because you are free to entertain desire, but the world is not obliged to fulfill your desires. So the gap between the fulfillment of desire and the desires that you have is ever widening, resulting in a lot of stress, pressure, and unhappiness. When these desires mount beyond a certain level, the pressure builds so much within you that you then, it's like the dam bursts and you resort to illegal, immoral, and unethical methods to fulfill your desires. This is called Nishiddha Karma, prohibited actions. Prohibited by whom? Your own conscience. As long as you remain focused on obligation, your mind is calm, thinking is clear, action perfect. As desires mount, the mind gets agitated, action becomes flawed because of the confusion in your intellect. And if desires are fueled to such an extent that they outstrip your resources, you cross the line into Nishiddha Karma. So Krishna gives a solution to this. And this is one of the most important concepts in the entire Bhagavad Gita. So grapple this to your soul. Remember this all your life and make sure you adhere to it. And that is the concept of yajna. Yajna, sacrifice. Krishna emphasizes the importance of yajna, which means actions dedicated to a higher ideal. Where you sacrifice means you dedicate your talent, your resources, your abilities to a higher cause, driven by an unselfish ideal. Krishna infuses the age-old ritual of yajna or havan as we know it with a refreshingly new meaning. In fact, it's not a new meaning. It's the foundation of the ritual itself. But people had forgotten it. As people have forgotten it now. Every one of us is exposed to havan. We have all done it or seen it in our life many times. But the significance of it, nobody knows. So, verse 10 of chapter 3.
सह यज्ञा प्रजा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः अनेन प्रसविष्यध्वम् एष वोस्त्विष्टकामधो.
When the Creator made the human being, He gave him the unique capacity of sacrifice and said, with this may you prosper. Let it be the Kamadhenu of all your endeavors. Means Kamadhenu is the mythological cow, the cow of sage Vasishtha. The cow resides in heaven, and if you find Kamadhenu and ask for anything, Kamadhenu has the capacity to fulfill all your desires. But here he says that yajna, sacrifice, is the Kamadhenu. The implication is that it is impossible to succeed if you do not act in a spirit of service and sacrifice. Yet, we are all trying to prosper through selfish pursuits, which is why the success that we achieve is like a chicken flying. How far does the chicken go? It flaps its wings desperately, and before it's off the ground, it's back. So, yajna is the capacity to work in a spirit of service and sacrifice for a higher cause. And then what happens? The moment you fix a higher cause beyond your selfish concerns, your mind expands, your creativity increases, you think of new ideas with which to serve the cause. You become successful because the law is when you give, you gain. You grab, you lose. You're happy. All selfish people are unhappy, stressed out, tense. No unselfish person is unhappy. You want to understand this? Take a look at little kids when they're playing. In school, maybe. One person takes out her lunchbox and says, "Oh, I've got something new now. You want it? Take it." When she gives it to her friend, watch the expression on her face. She has a smile, she's glowing. Another child is just looking at what her neighbor has brought. And the neighbor says, "No, it's mine." Watch the expression on her face. There's a frown. So anytime you think of taking, grabbing, aggrandizing to yourself, you are unhappy. Any moment you think of giving, just the thought, you don't have to give anything. And you are transported to a realm of happiness. And when you give, when you think of giving, your mindset changes, your desires reduce, you grow spiritually. As long as you're thinking of grabbing, your desires increase, you go down. So, he then details 3 distinct types of people, 3 thought textures of the mind. The lowest category, the tamasic people, they help themselves to the benefits given by society, endowed by society, without so much as the thought of repaying. Such a person, Krishna uses a very strong word for. He says he is a thief. When you think about it, initially you might say, "Oh, I'm not a thief. I haven't stolen anything." But when you look at all the things that have been bestowed on us for free and in abundance, and you don't so much as think of repaying for all that you have received, that makes us a thief, right? The Rajasic one acts for selfish ends, but the result is only stress and mental agitation. Krishna says he cooks but eats sin. He can't enjoy the fruits of his own hard work because he's stressed out. The only one who enjoys life as well as evolves spiritually is the sattvic person who works in a spirit of sacrifice for a higher ideal. So if you want to even enjoy life, you have to find a way to work in a spirit of sacrifice. Then he gives the exemptions to action. Those who have reached the state of realization, who are not stakeholders, shareholders in any enjoyment that the world offers, are exempt from this law that you must act. To the extent you become self-sufficient and are no longer dependent on the world, you are not obliged to act. This is true in the absolute as well as the relative sense. A self-realized person is not a shareholder in the world. He's totally exempt. He doesn't need to act. Yet you find every realized person wholeheartedly, completely working in the service of humanity. A scientist who's on the verge of discovering a cure for COVID, for instance, and is totally engrossed in that work, is naturally exempt from routine family duties. Krishna then concludes this scientific dissertation on action in verse 19.
तस्मादसक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो ह्याचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पूरुषः.
Tasmat, therefore, always perform obligatory action, asakta, without attachment. One who acts without attachment attains the supreme. So this verse is a conclusion after a rational scientific presentation. From verse 4 onwards, Krishna has given the reason, the logic for action. Now he summarizes by saying, always perform your obligations. Move to the fast track. Keep away from desire-driven activity. When must you perform obligation? Satatam, always, not sometimes. Spiritual life is not a part-time entertainment. It is a full-time commitment. And this obligatory duty you must do without allowing your likes and dislikes to interfere. And how must you do it? Do it well. Samyak achara. We tend to be lackadaisical, indifferent about our obligations. Here he says, not slipshod, but with all your heart and soul. Perform it perfectly, yet without attachment. Now, this is the crucial thing. How to act without attachment, how not to be attached, is by attaching yourself to a higher goal. And therefore, the higher goal is so important in life. Every single human being, whatever be his capability, you may be a sleeper, you may be the chairman of a company, but we are capable of fixing a higher goal. So this is the most important thing. And Krishna tops up this brilliant dissertation on action with an emotional appeal to motivate Arjuna. Often, the intellectual plea alone is not enough to prompt you to action. You need the backing of powerful emotional inspiration to get you off the mark. So he says, Janaka and all the people you admired performed action even though they were realized. So you also perform action, Arjuna. Note verse 21, in which he says, Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tat tat eva itarajanaha. Whatever the superior person does, that alone others do. Whatever example he sets, the world follows. So this verse is important for all of us who are leaders. We are parents. We are the boss in an office, in some situation. So how do you get your children to uphold the values that you want them to pick up? Not by lecturing to them, not by sermonizing, because the one thing you need to understand about children is the moment a parent opens her mouth, the child has switched off. They don't listen to what you're saying, but they watch very carefully how you live. If you're an egoistic person and saying, I am this, I do this, I do that, that's what they pick up. If you're a selfish person and you're not willing to give even to your own child or your spouse, that is what they pick up. So whatever standard you want the children or your subordinates to live up to, you must live it and stop talking. Don't preach. Just live the values you want others to follow. Now, the next 11 verses feature the critical steps to action. Desire and attachment come in the way of action. So in verse 25, Krishna says, act without attachment for a higher cause. Loka sangraha. This is the concept, again, just as yajna is a concept we need to pick up, loka sangraha is another concept. You must be inspired to act for the well-being of the world, for the well-being of people, not just your benefit. We act, but the quality of our action is determined by the vasanas. Atman enables all actions, whether it is a noble action or a criminal action, all are enabled by Atman. You are Atman. But in your delusion, you believe, Aham Karta, I am the doer. Atman doesn't act. It is Prakriti, vasanas that are functioning. So this egoistic concept of Kartrutva Bhavana creeps in. This makes us Vimudhatma, supreme fool. So all you have to do is drop the doership while continuing action. Don't stop the action. Then you transform from a Vimudhatma to a Mahatma, great soul. For this, you only have to understand Guna Guneshu Vartante iti Matvana Sajjate. Just understand that gunas function, gunas operate. You are immaculate, unconcerned with the gunas. This is a very useful verse because as per your vasanas, so will be your thought, your desires, the quality of your action, and the environment in which you find yourself. So you are the master architect of your life. And you collect like-minded people around. So this concept of guna guneshu vartante, that gunas function, we understand when it comes to the animal world. You understand a carnivore will be a carnivore. The nature of a dog, a pup, is it's full of affection and love. A lion is ferocious. A deer is timid. And an elephant is slow. You don't expect the dog to be ferocious or the deer to be slow. The deer is quick and fast. But you don't go and lecture to the elephant to be faster. You understand. And therefore, you have no problems in the animal world. But when it comes to human beings, all your problems amount to not understanding this basic concept of guna guneshu vartante. So you expect an aggressive person to be mild. You expect a negative person to be positive. You expect your ill-tempered spouse to not have a wild temper. And that is the cause of all problems. So as you evolve spiritually, you become more detached because this understanding gets grounded that gunas function. And this is the test of development. The highlight of this chapter is verse 30, in which he gives the prescription of a perfect action. Verse 30.
मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्याध्यात्मचेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विगतज्वरः.
Surrendering all actions in me with thoughts focused on the self, free from hope and mindness, fight without fever. So in this verse, he talks about two basic concepts. Before you act, you must have the energy and dynamism, the vitality to act. So one part of this verse deals with how to generate energy within yourself. And this energy that you've generated, you dissipate in the unproductive channels of the past and future. So the other aspect of this verse is how to avoid dissipation of energy. Now let's look at creation of energy. You create energy in three ways because we are gifted with three instruments: body, mind, intellect. So the first thing is the intellect must direct all your thoughts and actions towards the goal that you have chosen for yourself. And the assumption is the goal will be a higher one, unselfish goal. Thoughts have power, but when they go scattered in different directions, you don't experience the power. But when the thoughts are unidirectional, you generate power. Just as if you take a convex lens in the sunlight outside and keep a piece of paper below it at the right distance, what happens? The paper burns. Without the convex lens, nothing happens to the paper. What's the difference? The convex lens focuses all the light rays to one point, and that generates energy. Similarly, thoughts directed to one goal generate energy. Like in cricket, they say, if you want to be an outstanding cricketer, you must think cricket, eat cricket, dream cricket, everything in your life must be cricket. That consistency is what leads to success. Then with the mind, surrender to the idea. You must feel for the goal. It must be sacred to you. And then the higher the ideal that you surrender to, the greater is your energy. It's like if one servant in a home goes and asks for what she thinks she is owed by the boss treats her with scant respect. But suppose she gets all the servants in the locality together and she is the leader of those servants. She forms a union of domestic workers and goes to the same boss. How does she go? She goes with confidence and he treats her with respect. So where does she get this power from? The fact that she surrendered her will to the 300 servants that she represents. So surrender gives power. And the body must act dynamically. The more you act, the more energy you generate. You may have noticed that on days when you exercise, you feel energetic throughout the day. On days when you do not exercise, for whatever reason, you feel lethargic. This energy that you have generated dissipates in the unproductive channels of past worry, future anxiety, and present excitement. This is stark in sport. So the Wimbledon is going on now. At match point, who wins depends on whose mind is on the present. If the tennis player's mind goes to the past and says, how many times I have come to the finals and failed, or goes to the future, I must get the Wimbledon this time because by next year I'll be too old, then he's not concentrating on the present. The mind has already gone to the past and future, and there are errors, there are mistakes, there's simple things that get him out. Result, failure. So the intellect must direct the mind to the present action without allowing it to meander to the unproductive channels of past worry and future anxiety. Then you are concentrating. And when the mind is 100% behind the action, you perform perfect action, you become successful. And the last is without feverish excitement in the present. Suppose the doubt enters your mind that maybe I have lost a very important document. I've misplaced it. And even though you're looking for it in your safe, You don't find it. Your spouse comes and says, "What are you making such a fuss about? What are you looking for?" And you say, "I'm looking for the title deed." "Isn't this what you're looking for?" She pulls it out and you say, "Where did you find it?" She says, "It's right there in front of you all this while. Why did you not see it?" You got into a fever that, "Oh, I've lost it." So, to summarize, you generate energy by the intellect directing all thoughts to the chosen ideal, by the mind surrendering to the higher ideal, and the body constantly acting, working. This energy that you've generated, you prevent it from dissipating to the unproductive channels of past and future by getting your intellect to focus the mind on the present action. And the body must not get into this feverish excitement. Then, and with all this, fight. Fight doesn't mean literally fight, it means act. So, the intellect is all important here. Those who follow this formula achieve success, happiness, and spiritual growth. Ignore this advice, and you're neither successful nor happy. Spiritual growth is a far cry. Where do you begin? Identify your swadharma, your inner calling, core interest, predominant desire. It is difficult to excel if you invest your energies in a field alien to your nature. In the area of your swadharma, fix a higher goal as high as you can envisage. That is beyond your selfish, self-centered interests. With all this, you must remember that even a knowledgeable person acts according to his vasanas. Beings follow their nature. Meaning, so then he says, what can restraint do? Meaning, it takes time to change. Don't expect instant results. You have to do manana, reflection on the knowledge that you have acquired, varam, again and again. And then it all falls in place. So what you need to do is sow the seeds and wait. Don't be impatient. The fruit will emerge. Then Arjuna asks a question. What is it that takes me away from my chosen path and makes me do the things I ought not to do? Makes me do the things that I myself don't want to do? Krishna answers in verse 37.
श्रीभगवानुवाच काम एष क्रोध एषः रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा वेद्येनमिह वैरिणम्.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha, Krishna speaks. It is desire, it is anger, born of the quality of rajas, passion. It is a voracious devourer, mahashana, mahapapma, it's very sinful. Vidhi enam iha vairinam. Know this as the enemy here. So the enemy is within, not out there. Yet you waste precious time and energy in trying to deal with external forces and fight external enemies. Desire comes in three shades: sattva, purity, passion; rajas, and tamas, ignorance. Blending poetry with philosophy, Krishna describes how these three kinds of desires shroud Atman, the divine spark in each one of us. Sattva is like smoke around fire. The brilliance and splendor of Atman shines forth in a sattvic person, even though the impurity is there. And it does not take effort for the smoke to go. A passing breeze is enough to take it away. Rajas covers Atman like dust on a mirror. You need to put effort to remove the dust. And you can't see the image clearly. Selfishness and ego blur the image of the self. You're unable to see divinity in a rajasic person, in a selfish person. Tamas is much worse. It's like an embryo in the uterus. Not only does it completely cover divinity, but it takes time for you to emerge out of lethargy, indolence, and indifference. Desire is your greatest enemy, says Krishna. He uses 4 different words to describe desire as enemy. It's a voracious devourer because it eats you up. And sinful, it causes a great deal of mental agitation and stress. It is unquenchable like fire. Trying to satisfy desire by fulfilling it is like trying to extinguish fire by adding fuel to it. Besides, it mutates into far more destructive forms like anger, greed, delusion, envy, and arrogance. Yet everyone in the world today is busy fanning desire. You are nurturing it, nourishing it, promoting it. Not just individuals. Organizations are doing the same. Nations are doing the same. Krishna then gives the way out. Rise to a higher desire. The lower will lose its hold over you. He concludes with a highly inspiring message. Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho, Kamarupam Durasadam. Kill this formidable enemy in the form of desire. It's difficult, very difficult to overcome. But rise slowly to the highest desire, that of self-realization. By now, the warrior in Arjuna is provoked and responds. Tomorrow, we will continue with the cameo, the overview of the next chapters. But those of you who would like to join us in the webinars, which are on Saturdays, every Saturday, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., please do so. These are for free and are open to anybody. All you have to do is register, and then we will send you the link. So the registration can be done on our website, which will be announced just now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. To keep your inspiration going, watch short clips of Jayaji's lectures on our YouTube channel, Vedanta Vision. We upload 2 new videos every week. Subscribe to the Vedanta Vision channel and click the bell icon to get notifications. If you have not yet registered for the Bhagavad Gita webinars that are held every Saturday, please register on our website for free, vedantavision.org. Thank you. We look forward to having you with us tomorrow.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti